Now, I really hope this next discussion is listed properly. I do apologize to Daryl over here. Now, brace yourselves for the electrifying keynote: how to build new spaces, promote more diverse and equitable work cultures. Picture this: a workplace where innovation thrives and diversity isn't just welcomed, it's celebrated. So, our keynote speaker is about to unveil the secrets behind creating these dynamic environments where every voice is heard, every idea is valued, and every individual empowered to shine. So, get ready to be inspired. Our keynote speaker, Vincent Allen, who is the founder and the managing director of VAAV Industries, and also our gold sponsor, takes the stage to ignite our imaginations, fuel our drive for the future, and including uh, reigns as supreme. So please welcome him in a huge round of applause.
Hi there.
There
Thanks.
you go.
I'm
There,
here.
right
Yeah.
there. Perfect.
Sneak past you, I guess. Can everyone hear me okay? All right. So the first thing I want to do before we get started with the actual presentation or any of the things I'm going to present to you today is I just want to, we're in March. Can we just have all of the ladies stand up, please? Every woman in the room, please stand up. Okay, what I'd like to do, it's Women's History Month, so I just want to give all of you ladies a round of applause for everything you guys do. It's all of that is going to be central to what we talk about today. So one of the things, my background is I'm a broadcast engineer, audiovisual engineer. I founded and run a company that really specializes in those systems, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today, and how we move from where we are now to a more remote centric culture where I think everyone agrees that remote work is the future, and there's been sort of a divide amongst executives. Some people, like GitLab, for example, is a 100% remote company. We'll talk about that later. But then other people like Jamie Dimon, Elon Musk think you have to be in the office to do good work. And I think we both know that's not true. So here's the title slide. My details are up there. If you want to continue the conversation, I have a much longer talk about this that deals with everything from pay gap stuff to racial disparity and all of the things that we talk about when we talk about diversity. This isn't primarily a DEI talk; it's more of a technology talk, but we weave in and out of it. So let's just get started. So during the pandemic, we saw that roughly roughly 6% of the global population, there was a 6% increase in global productivity. Sounds like a small number. It's really not a small number. I'm going to just advance to the next slide. So I want to start with this. A room with a view soothes the mind. I'd also like to say it soothes the soul. Now, this is pulled from a presentation that we do relative to digital windows and other technology in the collaboration space. Does anyone know what a digital window is? Show of hands. Anyway, no. Okay, so digital windows have been around for quite a long time. They were very popular in the 90s, where you take a computer monitor and you would build it into a box, and voila, you're looking at Aruba out your virtual window, right? So during the pandemic, they became popular again, whereby you're sitting in your home office and the person in LA or New York or Berlin or wherever is right there next to you for a collaboration technology. And I think the nice thing about that is you can be working 1 minute and be looking at Aruba the next, right? And so it helps us to take our little breaks. We know that no human is 100% productive for more than about 40 minutes at a time. We've known that for decades. Like that's why when you started to see things come over from Asia in the 90s and early 2000s, where you started seeing companies put in video game systems in their conference rooms, gyms downstairs, childcare, because everybody knows you're not staring at a spreadsheet for 3 hours straight and you're 100% effective, right? So we're going to keep going. I'm going to move to the next slide here, if we can throw that up. So we just want to talk a little bit about remote work and where we've been, and then we're going to talk about where we're going. So from 2005 to basically now, we don't have all the data for late 23 and 24 in, but through 2020 to 2022, we saw that there was an uptick in remote work from the beginning of the century of nearly 160%, right? That's a lot. Most of us are working on our phones, we're working on our tablets, we're working on our laptops. Can you give me the slide back in the confidence monitor, please? Thank you. So the COVID-19 pandemic revolutionized a lot of things. It was terrible in a lot of ways. We all lost a lot of people. But what it did do was it accelerated everything in that space. I'll give you an example. So at the beginning of the pandemic, I was running AV for Weight Watchers. Right now, at the beginning of the pandemic, they had nothing in terms of how do we do our studios in a remote sense. Their business model wasn't built that way. It just wasn't. Right. So we had to iterate and build some things and work with Zoom and some other vendors to be able to build that functionality into there. They had already shipped an iOS and an Android app. We built out a web portal as well. We were able to ship that functionality in 11 days. And in the first 7 days of that product being live, we had less than 100 support incidents. Why is that important? Well, we were able to take people that were now trapped at home and nervous about what was happening and be able to drive content to them from coaches, doctors, celebrity chefs, things of that nature, so you could get this content in your home. That's now part of Weight Watchers' permanent go-to-market, and it actually became the technology that led to Oprah's Soulful Sunday brunches. So there's a significant uptake in that technology. Why, why is that important? Everybody wants to work flexibly now. Nobody wants to really go into the office if they don't have to. So let's just keep moving. Um, so now we're getting into the diversity part, where, like I said, we're going to weave in and out. So the executive director of UN Women has said that the pandemic has wiped out years of progress towards gender equality and dealing a huge economic blow to women around the world. This is very, very true. I've seen this firsthand. I'm going to tell you a little story really quick. During the pandemic, I was running broadcast operations for a rather well-known national law firm, who I won't name here. That they were talking in this conference, they were educating their internal attorneys about how they deal with their clients as it relates to the pandemic, as it relates to remote work, whether or not remote work could be considered a right, or is that a perk that you can say, I'm going to let you work remotely X number of days a week in lieu of $30,000 a year, which we see today. That's happening. If you just go on LinkedIn, Indeed, any job site, you will see a variance in the salary, and you're seeing people offer 10, 20, $30,000 less a year for the opportunity to work remotely. Why is that important? So during the pandemic, what was happening was you saw a lot of women forced out of the workforce to take care of children. It was the 50s all over again. You had women at home taking care of the babies and not really getting their just due. I'm going to move ahead to the next slide here. So when we talk about this for a second, 3 million fewer women are in the labor force from 2020 to 2022. It's a significant number. 3 million women from the beginning of the pandemic to the midway or towards 2/3 of the way through left the workforce for one reason or another. And women lost over 5 million jobs during that time. And female labor participation fell at a rate of roughly 2.5%. This skews different in different areas, different parts of the country, different sectors, but this is a major problem that we need to address. Right? So let's move on. So we're going to start talking about how the office structure came to be. We all know open office plan, all of these things. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on this. Right? Just talk about the internet for a minute. There are over 4 billion people globally on the internet, right? Just not just here in the United States, but all over the world. I'd like to pause for a moment and tell you all a little story. Maybe about 5 years ago, I was spending Christmas in Trinidad. Right? And I met this woman in Trinidad who had been a broadcast producer at one point in her life. She got married, had some kids or whatever, and she went home to Trinidad. She was editing video for every major broadcast outlet in Southeast Florida from Trinidad. And this was 5 years ago. It was 2 years pre-pandemic. That was happening then. It should be happening now. Right. So we have this technology, and as countries that don't have the same level of infrastructure that the United States has bring online better high-speed connections and these kinds of things, we'll be able to do that. We'll be able to do that even more. So let's move along. So Bill Gates, we all know who Bill Gates is. We all remember when he said this. The internet is becoming the town square for the global village of tomorrow. So let's sit there for a minute, right? We've all seen the situation where people perceive Facebook or Twitter, I guess it's called X now, as the global town hall, the town square, the bulletin board, where people argue about everything, honestly, and people perceive a right to free speech on these internet platforms. It's become how we converse with each other, right? It's become like this is being streamed out right now, and there are people that are watching it that are taking advantage of the ability to communicate with someone from all over the world and to communicate in very asynchronous ways where you put up a video, you put up a picture and a post, and people will comment when they have the time or feel like it. So how does that impact the what we're talking about today, but building these work systems of tomorrow, right? How do we think about that? Well, during the pandemic, we learned that you don't need a conference room to be in a conference, right? And maybe that's plausibly not a good thing. We've all had those days where it's from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. is one big Zoom meeting, and you close your laptop at the end of the day and you just pass out. We all had that, right? I mean, I know I do. Maybe I'm just old, but we all have that happen, right? But we also know that it's much more productive. Those meetings tend to be more productive when you're sitting where you're comfortable, right? You're sitting where you're comfortable, you maybe don't have a tie on, right? And you are doing what you need to do. But even in the context of the office, right? Who's ever, show of hands, ever had to look at a construction diagram? Anybody? Right. Okay. Yeah, I do it every day when we're building out broadcast systems, conference rooms, and the like. I can tell you reviewing a construction diagram, significantly more effective on Zoom or Teams or WebEx. You throw the diagram up, people are whiteboarding, circling where it needs to be bubbled or things need to change, and you literally have someone adjusting the diagram on the call. So by the end of the hour, the whole thing's done. Whereas we're in the office, you have someone throw it up on the screen, someone's taking notes, and then you go back to the CAD team, to the drafter, and then 3 days later you get your updated drawings, right? So just one simple example of how it's significantly more effective, right? We've got tools in my background. I started video editing before you could edit on a computer, right? Like I have memories of working with the guys who made Final Cut in the first version before it was out, learning how to run Final Cut. And there's significant ways we can do online editing now that we just couldn't in the past, where you can literally stream your high-res content from the camera, right, to the cloud-based service, of which there are myriad. And you can have your editor right there and your producers and your director making notes in real time. These are not things you can do on a set, right? Sets are chaotic places, right? I've been on 1,000 film and TV sets in my life. They're wildly chaotic places, and they're often not conducive to getting anything done other than that one shot, right? And so there are myriad examples of how we move forward into this. So let's talk about the traditional business scape, because I feel like most of us probably have come up through a cubicle farm to some degree. Most of our professional life is a life imitating art of the Dilbert comic strip. How do you do that? So we're talking about building these smart conference rooms, right? Smart conference rooms, smart meeting rooms, MPRs, all of these things. What we're seeing is that you're seeing an integration, not just of AV and IT. We've been talking about that for a decade, but over the pandemic, we've seen an integration, a convergence, if you will, of broadcast technology. So all the stuff that runs CNN or whatever, right? And the AV stuff, right? Like right over here, I'm going to do a really bad AV guy thing and point out the camera. This is a robotic camera, right? So you will see, if you watch ESPN, if you watch the Pat McAfee show on YouTube or ESPN, you will see cameras like this scattered all over his set. And that's going to broadcast on a major network. ESPN is owned by Disney, who also owns ABC. It's one of the oldest broadcast networks in our country, and they're shooting everything on robotic PTZ cameras. Now they're shooting them on the $20,000 PTZ cameras, but the technology is the same, right? And so we're seeing all of that converge in a way that leads us to be able to do things in a way that we heard this panel before talk about fatigue. Zoom fatigue is what they were talking about, right? it just adapted for the VR space. Well, why does that happen? And how can we fix it to be able to get us to this place where we're working remotely in a healthful way, right? Well, one of the reasons Zoom fatigue happens is because our brains aren't designed to do this, right? We're not designed to look at the screen, look at the camera, look at the screen, look at the camera, over and over and over again across the day. These muscles are not designed to do that, right? And so you get exhausted. It also just overloads your brain in terms of how long your brain is prepared to look someone in the eye, right? And so that it happens. So we've got to build in some things. Well, one of the things that we saw happen recently is there's a company called Hudley. Hudley makes video conference cameras. They're about so big, right? They plug into your PC and they auto track, right? They have ones that go on top of your laptop, and they have other ones that are designed for very large conference spaces, right? So one of the things that Hudley did during the pandemic, which was really smart, is they called guys like me who have spent a lifetime in broadcast control rooms calling shots. So for those of you who don't know what that looks like, that's a headset and that's standby one you're up, two coming to you, all this kind of thing that you've seen, in movies and stuff before, and built those kind of decision-making processes into their algorithm. So it's called Hudley Director. Well, the cameras are the crew. The director is the network module. And you connect multiple cameras, you scatter them across the room, and then now it's not only just switching to the person who's chatting, but then it's taking a reaction shot of the room. And science tells us that that is significantly easier for us to look at. Why? Because we're used to our entire lives watching that on television, right? You go to church, right? If anyone goes to church or any sort of house of worship nowadays, everyone's got a live stream at their house of worship. And so you're used to seeing camera shot of the speaker, audience reaction shot. We're conditioned to it. So it's significantly easier. Let's throw the PowerPoint back up, please. So again, another quote. I mean, doing a keynote, why not quote Steve Jobs, right? Technology alone is not enough. It's technology married with the liberal arts, married with the humanities, that yields the results that makes our hearts sing. Steve Jobs. I don't think anybody in technology would argue that Steve knew what he was talking about. I mean, most of us have an iPhone in our pocket because of his brilliance. He was so committed to that. I happen to have one of my cousins was an executive at Apple at this time. When the iPhone was coming out, Steve was so committed to it being revolutionary that he had the only one that existed. The only one. And there were executives that left because he was not willing to communicate to anyone else in the company or anywhere else that they were working on it, and they felt like Apple needed to be moving in the direction of telephony and music together, which is what they were doing, but they just weren't telling anybody about it. Steve knew, all that to say, Steve knew what he was talking about, right? And so when we build these systems, we have to build them with usability, ergonomics, the customer experience in mind. All too often, when we build these technological systems, I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, but AV is usually the redheaded stepchild, right? In the construction process, everything else happens first. The fire safety systems, fair enough. The elevators, all of the construction, AV goes in last. And so you usually get the bottom of the barrel in terms of everything, right? And so what we have to do is we have to change the paradigm on that and start thinking about these systems, maybe not first, right? Because fire safety is kind of important, right? But sooner, right? Earlier in the construction and development process so that we can build systems that work for everybody. Who here has seen the movie Kingsman? Anybody know that movie? So there's a scene very early on in that movie. I love that movie for this, where they're sitting at the headquarters around the table and you've got the different spies who are scattered in their locations globally. Put on the glasses, right? It's one of the best Hollywood depictions of what AR could look like simply in the conferencing space, right? Everybody who has a cell phone has a LiDAR scanner built into your device. You've got multiple cameras, you've got LiDAR scanners, you've got a lot of stuff built in. We could do most of that right now with technology you could go to Best Buy and get. Not even like high-end technology, right? So it's just a matter of will. So we got to begin to change the dynamic, which is what Steve's talking about building these systems that allow people to work flexibly in the way that's most comfortable for them. All right, let's move on to the next slide. Uh, Again, Matt Milling, CEO of Automatic. The future of work is remote. So let's talk about that a little bit. Most of us, I mean, really all of us who were of working age when the pandemic hit, had to figure out how to kickball change and work remotely on a dime. Some companies were ready, had a remote work policy, summer Fridays or whatever that they just leveraged when the pandemic hit. Most places were wringing their hands about whether or not to close their doors. Law firms, banks, hedge funds, all of these places have complex compliant requirements that are hurled at them by our government, and for good reason, right? Nobody wants their social security number or their financial records just appearing on the public internet, right? So that there's good reason for these compliance regulations, but it restricts what they were able to do in some ways, and they weren't ready. And so a lot of work was done during the pandemic to work on that, right? So how do we do these things? What technology is out there that can help us with this? Well, let's talk about Zoom fatigue again for a second. One of the things, who's seen the Aveeno ad during the pandemic where Jennifer Aniston is in the Zoom call on one side and then there's the actress on the other? Okay, so that was me. My team worked on that, and what we did was we built a system. We built a system called Skytron for a company called American Movie Company. And basically, it's an iteration of a reasonably well-known film tool called an Interatron, where you're doing an interview and where people can see each other in the teleprompter. So we iterated on that and built that for that client and others, and with the goal of being able to do this kind of stuff. So Jen was in a studio in LA, never saw the director or the other actress for 1 second, not the entire shoot, right? The other actress was in a studio down in rural New Jersey where the wireless signal was very bad, right? It was almost non-existent. We had to fly in some specialty technology to get them online, but where they could see each other across a proprietary communication, basically video conference. Like it's basically Zoom, but just leveraging a different application, and they could communicate. But the thing that it also did was that it allowed the director to be anywhere in the world he wanted to be. So you could be in this particular instance, he was in London, right? And so you have direction happening. We leveraged that same system for History of Swear Words on Netflix, which is starring Nick Cage, where the camera operator is traveling from community to community doing these interviews and setting up a green screen, setting up a teleprompter with the camera, and then the director is on his laptop in his pajamas in his living room saying like, hey, can you just a little lower, a little to the left, a little to the right, speak up, all these good things. And now that's just the way the industry works. How many people have turned on the news and seen interview brought to you by WebEx or Zoom or like whatever? It's every day, right? Let's move to the next slide. So I'm going to skip past this. This is part of a larger talk, but let's just talk about some of the examples. We talked about multi-camera video production. I'm going to skip past that. Let's talk about emerging tech, right? So you see here, this is an example of an immersive telepresence robot. You see these at big conferences. You see these at Infocom. You see these at ISE, where the robot, and you've seen these in movies and stuff, where it's like an iPad, right? And a camera, and it like literally follows you around. It's kind of cool. It's a little creepy. Oh, but there's other things at play. We talked about Skytron, what we built, but realistically, you guys talked about this in the last panel. The future is VR, right? I mean, I don't think anyone in this room would disagree with that. When the Vision Pro came out, 5 minutes later, there was already video online of people doing a FaceTime call with 3D digital avatars. 2 years before that, Canon, the camera company, shipped an app that no one expected them to ship. They built this application that was basically Zoom in VR. Why did they do that? Because they're not trying to go to business, right? And so before I close, I just want to talk for a minute about, just pose a question to the audience. Do y'all think that you would be more productive if you could work from wherever you wanted to and just put on a headset or put on a pair of glasses and just see your counterpart in your glasses and be doing your work and then take a break and go make lunch for your kids or go pick them up from school or whatever it is that whatever throw a load of laundry in or whatever else it is you need to do in your life. So a lot of these CEOs who talk about work-life balance isn't real. It's not real because they don't want it to be. But today we have systems. My company, Vav Industry, has built systems and is working on systems to make that easier and to build that out. So if you'd like to continue this conversation, my information was up on the screen before, and I'll be around. So if there's any questions, I'd like to leave a couple minutes for questions if you have any. Questions? Yes, no, maybe? Complaints? Yeah, can you just go back to the first slide, please, of the back? I'll do it. There you go. Sure.
Good. Any question? One question?
Question? Any?
Here, let me come to you.
Well, sure, 100%. And we saw this during the pandemic with the kids, right? Like it is, and we've seen this for years with homeschool kids, right? It is that it is a balance. You do have to get outside. You can't just decide you're a vampire and shun the sun, right? You have to interact with other humans. But the mistake that everyone makes is characterizing it as I'm not interacting with anyone else and like whatever, turn your camera on, have conversations. We talked about virtual windows for a minute. VR is going to take that away, right? Because VR is going to be the thing where you're in this VR space and you're conversing with people in this avatar-driven space. But yeah, I mean, it certainly is a concern, right? That there are always going to be some people that don't leave their house for days on end and plausibly haven't bathed and are just in Fortnite or whatever. There's always going to be those people, but for the rest of us, most of us who have other things to do, like you go to the grocery store, you take the kids to the soccer game, you just, I mean, remote work's not new, right? It's finding those other balancing points where you're maybe not the relationships that drive your life, maybe you're not having those same kind of conversations as you would do in the office. But the other side of that is that the way we do the office has become different, and you do have these virtual windows and things in VR where you are having these informal catch-ups and things like that. It's just a matter of sort of changing the way we think about it in the same way we did with the internet, social media, cell phones, like pick a thing, right? We've done this before, right? It's not as complicated as a lot of the chatter has made it seem, right? In my opinion. Anybody else?
Give it up one more time for Vincent Allen.
Thank you, guys. Yeah.
Extremely insightful. Thank you. Thank you.